Don't overestimate yourself, but don't underestimate who you could be. That's a much better way of thinking about it. Psychologists of the careless sort have been pushing the idea of self-esteem for a very long time, probably since the early 20th century, that you should be content with yourself the way you are. But no, you shouldn't. Seriously, you're nowhere near what you could be. You're not even close. That's a much more optimistic message. You ain't seen nothing yet. So don't overestimate yourself now, but don't underestimate your future self. You have so much influence as an individual if you get your act together more than you can believe. There isn't anything that has more influence than that. You have all the power there is right where you are to put things right around you. Start now. Develop a noble vision of who you could be. Put that into practice. Develop discipline. Familiarize yourself with the great works of the past. Learn to read, write, speak, and think. Man, you'll be unstoppable. The absence of your full being leaves a hole that is filled by terrible things at minimum. So at minimum, you have an ethical responsibility to ensure that the world doesn't evolve into something approximating hell. At maximum, you have the responsibility, the heavy ethical responsibility, to do everything in your power to make things as good as you can possibly make them. And it's on you. People say they'd like a meaningful life, fair enough, but the price you pay for meaning that transcends tragedy is the adoption of responsibility for the catastrophe of existence. That ennobles you, it makes you strong, competent, and worthwhile, someone whose life justifies their own suffering. There's nothing better you could possibly do than that. Although there's a near infinite number of ways to look at the world, there isn't a near infinite number of ways to act successfully in it. You have to take care of yourself today in a way that doesn't interfere with taking care of yourself tomorrow, next week, next year, or even decades from now. You can't just do what you want in the next hour. If it's impulsive pleasure seeking, like excessive drinking, drug use, careless behavior, or betraying people for short-term gain, you'll pay for it tomorrow, next week, next year. Because you exist in the future, and because you have to live with yourself, there are only certain ways you can act that will actually work. Use minimal necessary force. Don't push any harder than you need to, because all you do is generate counterforce, and then you're in conflict. A little conflict can become a lot very rapidly, and if you have any sense, that's not what you want. A noble goal is a very good way to begin. The truth is, each of us has enough potential, if properly manifested, to contend with life's challenges in a noble way, to rise above them, and to transcend them. We can make the world a much better place than it is for ourselves, our families, and our communities. We can constrain the malevolence in our own hearts and perhaps have a positive effect on those around us. That actually does make things better, and we can do it. That's where meaning in life is found. You are characterized by an indefinite potential. It isn't easy to understand exactly what that potential is, but you know it's there when people say you're not living up to your potential. That potential is called forth when you take on responsibility, because it won't manifest unless you take on a load. You won't develop in all the ways you can unless you set yourself a serious challenge. It takes the challenge to pull that out of you. You need to load yourself up before the demands of life will discipline you properly. Listen to your resentment. It's one of the best things you can do. You have to admit it exists first, then admit to the fantasies it generates, and then admit what you regard as the way out of it. That's difficult because it means learning things about yourself that you probably don't want to learn. Resentment only means one of two things. Either shut up, grow up, quit whining, and get on with it, or someone is playing the tyrant to you, and that tyrant might even be you. The abyss is an old idea. You gaze into it long enough, and what you find is a monster, the dragon at the bottom. But if you go into it as deeply as you can, what you find is your fragmented self in a desiccated condition, and then you revive it. That means if you look in the darkness, you find the light. The light stands out against the darkness, but the light is found in the darkness. That's a quest narrative. It means something fundamental. If you take yourself out of your current state of predictability and safety, put yourself in a new situation, you'll learn. New parts of you turn on. The idea is that if you move yourself out into the world and push yourself against challenges, more and more of you turns on. Then the question is, what would you be if all of you that could be turned on was turned on? The answer is, you would be the resurrection of your best possible self. If you actually want something, you can have it. The question is, what do you mean by actually want? The answer is that you reorient your life in every possible way to make the probability of that occurring as certain as possible. That's a sacrificial idea. You don't get everything, but maybe you can have what you need. All you have to do is ask, but asking isn't a whim or today's wish. You have to be deadly serious about it. Sit on your bed one day and ask yourself, what remarkably stupid things am I doing on a regular basis to absolutely screw up my life? If you actually ask that question and you have to want to know the answer, you'll figure it out so fast it'll make your hair curl. The meaning of life is to be found in responsibility. When you put things together and take responsibility for things, meaning emerges from that. It's like a symphony composed of layers of patterns working harmoniously together, speaking directly to people of meaning. That's why people love music so much. Meaning is actually an instinct. It's the deepest thing about us. The positive emotion we find sustaining is experienced in relationship to an unachieved goal. It's hope that drives us forward. Identity is something practical. It's a dramatic role you play out in the world. While playing that out, it has to furnish you with a life. It has to be negotiated with other people. When you're a very young child, you live in a fantasy world, but identity has to expand beyond its egocentric focus and increasingly be negotiated in the social world. Discipline is necessary. Before you can be a painter who paints beyond mere memory, you have to inculcate discipline, skill, and hard work. It's the sacrifice of the present for the future. Once you manage that, things open up. That's why we have disciplines. You have to narrow yourself first, and then you can broaden outward. That's part of the process of maturation. Chaos and order are fundamental. Everyone in their right mind knows there's a million ways to do things wrong, and one way if you're lucky to do things right. The notion that it's a very narrow pathway you tread upon if you're doing things right, that's wisdom. It's the line between chaos and order that you're supposed to be on constantly. If you're a little too far in one direction, it's too much chaos. If you're a little too far in the other, it's too much order. The balance has to be exactly right. Rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. It's about a general attitude toward life. Hierarchies are stable features of life. Wherever you have a system of values, you have a hierarchy because one thing is better than another. Standing up straight is an act of courage. It's taking on the voluntary responsibility of contending with hierarchical organization and uncertainty. Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone responsible for helping. That's an extension of Rule 1. People are often ashamed and anxious because of their insufficiencies. It's useful to develop an ethic of detached self-regard, not narcissism, not self-esteem, just the clear realization that as other people have value, so do you. Rule 3. Know what you want. You have to know what you're doing with your life generally, but more particularly in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you want from your friends, family, intimate relationships, career, education, mental and physical health? If you could have what you wanted, how would you be functioning across those dimensions? Rule 4. Be precise in your speech. It specifies your goal and reduces uncertainty. You see what you aim at, and I don't mean that metaphorically. You're a lot more blind than you think. Most of what's in front of you is blurry. Your peripheral vision is extremely low resolution. You see clearly only a tiny focal area. That's where you're pointing your eyes. You point your eyes at what you want to pay attention to, and what you want to pay attention to is generally associated with what you want. The secret is the voluntary adoption of responsibility. That's the central message of the West. Pick up your cross and bear it. Everyone's been told that, but they don't know what it means because it hasn't been articulated enough to become practical. Look at the terrible responsibilities you have right in front of you. Your family is hurting. You're in trouble. There are problems in the world. All you have to do is take responsibility for it, and then you've got what you need. Self-esteem and happiness are not what sustain you. Life is difficult, and there's a lot of suffering in it. You have to learn how to conduct yourself in the face of that. The problem with the pursuit of happiness is that when life's storms come along, happiness disappears and you're left with nothing. You need to pursue something deeper than happiness, meaning. Sustaining meaning is generally found in responsibility to yourself and others. When you commit to something and make sacrifices, you discover that letting go of something you value in the present gains you something you value even more in the future. That's a massive discovery, one of the primary factors separating human beings from animals. Incremental improvement is unstoppable. If there are things about your life that bother you, decompose them into solvable sub-problems. Set yourself a task that's difficult, but not so difficult you can't attain it. Then step up improvement across time incrementally. There's humility in that. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't set grandiose goals, but incremental improvement will get you a tremendous distance. Trust is an act of courage, not naivety. If you trust someone once your eyes are open, that's courage, and it opens up the world. You can withstand a fair bit of life's catastrophe by establishing the proper covenant and acting in a trustworthy manner. The absence of your full being leaves a hole filled by terrible things. You have an ethical responsibility to ensure the world doesn't evolve into something approximating hell. At maximum, you have the responsibility to do everything in your power to make things as good as you can. There isn't a near infinite number of ways to act successfully in the world. You have to take care of yourself today in a way that doesn't interfere with taking care of yourself tomorrow. You can't just do what you want in the next hour. If it's impulsive pleasure seeking, you'll pay for it later. Use minimal necessary force. Don't push any harder than you need to. A little conflict can become a lot very rapidly. You are characterized by an indefinite potential. That potential is called forth when you take on responsibility. You won't develop unless you set yourself a serious challenge. Listen to your resentment. It tells you what you need to say and do to stop being wronged. The abyss contains both chaos and opportunity. If you confront it, you find light in the darkness. If you actually want something, you can have it, but you have to reorient your life to make it certain. The meaning of life is found in responsibility. When you take responsibility, meaning emerges. Identity is negotiated in the social world. You have to expand beyond egocentric focus. Discipline is the sacrifice of the present for the future. Once you master it, things open up. Chaos and order must be balanced. The line between them is where you should be. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. It's an act of courage. Treat yourself like someone responsible for helping. Know what you want in the next 3 to 5 years. Be precise in your speech. It reduces uncertainty and specifies your goal. The secret is voluntary responsibility. Pick up your cross and bear it. Self-esteem and happiness are fleeting. Meaning sustains you through suffering. Sustaining meaning comes from responsibility to yourself and others. Incremental improvement is powerful. Small steps compound over time. Trust is courage, not naivety. It opens the world. The absence of your full being leaves a hole. Fill it with responsibility. Act successfully by taking care of yourself today without harming tomorrow. Use minimal necessary force. Conflict escalates quickly. Your potential is unlocked by responsibility and challenge. Resentment signals what you need to confront. The abyss holds both danger and opportunity. If you truly want something, align your life to achieve it. Meaning comes from responsibility. Adopt it, and meaning follows. This paragraph maintains the original meaning and wording while presenting it as a continuous flow of thought. Let me know if you'd like any refinements.